say that I'm really honored that I've been given this role of moderating this very important panel discussion. Without any further delay, I would like to set the context of this discussion first, and then I'll ask questions that a lot of us have in our minds from this expert panel. DC pension scheme, this reform has been going on for a few years now, and while its core benefits are that it is going to create a sustainable pension system for the governments, the ancillary benefits of the scheme are that these schemes are good for the financial markets. They're also good in terms of developing the insurance sector eventually. And then there are other economic benefits of this scheme in terms of job creation, in terms of improved transparency in the pension governance, in terms of improved digital infrastructures and micropayment gateways for pension contributions. So I'll start with Mr. Farooq Sabzwari, and I'd like to ask him what, in his view, is going to be the impact of these schemes on the financial markets.
Thank you very much for your question. But thank you SECP, बहुत ज़रूरी topic है for discussion. The markets need a large pool of savings. दुनिया भर में what you have seen is pension funds minimum 50%, चले मैं ज़्यादा कह रहा हूँ, but minimum 30% इनका equities में meaning risky assets में भी लगा होता है. अगर मैं general developed markets का देखूँ तो minimum 50 है. It may actually be more than 50%, which is parked in risky assets. पाकिस्तान में हमारी एक अलमिया रहा है कि we've never found a support base. मैं सिर्फ मार्केट की बात कर लेता हूँ. एक support base जो कि patient capital support base हो. A pool of savings which are always available when a product is launched. For example, एक छोटी सी मैं बात करता हूँ ETF. हमने exchange traded funds launch किए थे इसी को देखते हुए कि pension provident funds long term या longevity risk को किस तरह balance करें. तो we thought indexed linked जो funds हैं उनको launch करना चाहिए, and पूरी दुनिया में passive investment is a theme that's taken off in a big way. पाकिस्तान में unfortunately ETF launch तो हो गए but वो liquid नहीं है. So clearly there is that pool of capital जो कि savings से आता है, वो savings pool जिसको longevity risk को manage करना है, वो उसको देख भी नहीं रहे या बहुत कम लोग हैं जो उसको देख रहे हैं. So I think once you get that pool of capital in the door, whether thankfully through the DC scheme, इसके फ़वायद बहुत हैं. एक तो यही है कि deepen the market, क्योंकि ETF जैसे जो products हैं जो longevity risk के लिए manage करने के लिए हमने introduce किए, उसको एक demand मिल जाता है from this pool of asset. जो मैं कह रहा हूँ आपसे दुनिया भर में 50%. Let me also tell you, हम तो equities की बात करते हैं, बड़ा risky है जी. हम तो ये कहते हैं ना equities तो बहुत risk है. What about startups? What about PE? What about alternative investments? So a lot of the developed world has actually used this pool of capital to expand their private equity business as well. यही pool of capital है जो long term private equity में भी काम कर रहा है, hedge funds में भी काम कर रहा है. So alternative investments have also taken a good chunk of this pool of savings. तो जो आपने बात की, bottom line हमारे लिए PSX पे वही है जो यहाँ DC या conversion from DB to DC है, which is awareness and education. ये चीज़ हमारे यहाँ भी बड़ी missing लग रही है at PSX, चाहे वो product portfolio हो जिसमें ETF है या वो सुकूक हो जो कि आप 5,000 रुपए में भी ख़रीद सकते हैं. The knowledge base is very limited. लोगों को पता नहीं है, लोगों को अंदाज़ा नहीं है तो हम एक कंपैरिजन की थी या एक कंपैरिजन हुई थी हमारे साथ, एंड आई थिंक एसईसीपी का एक मीटिंग थी विद द आईएमएफ। मैं इसको इसलिए दोहरा रहा हूँ कि उन्होंने कंपैरिजन किया विद श्रीलंका। उनका श्रीलंका में 95%, सॉरी, दे सेड अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल इन्वेस्ट इन एक्विटीज़। आपके यहाँ बिल्कुल नहीं है ट्रेंड। ऑल योर इन्वेस्टमेंट इज इन योर मनी मार्केट फंड या डेट इंस्ट्रूमेंट। वहाँ एटलीस्ट 30 to 40% एक्विटी में इन्वेस्ट हो रहा है। वजह क्या है? आपस में कुछ डायलॉग चल रहा था। आई जस्ट कम बैक फ्रॉम श्रीलंका, सो आई वाज फ्रेश विद द नॉलेज दैट वहाँ लिटरेसी रेट 95% है। बट दैट्स इट, दैट किल्ड। इस पर फिर सवाल कोई बनना नहीं चाहिए। वहाँ वो लोग समझते हैं उस रिस्क को, या वो समझते हैं किस तरह इसको मैनेज करना है, विच इज़ वाई देयर इन्वेस्टमेंट इन टू द रिस्कियर एसेट क्लास इज़ अ लॉट हायर देन अ जुरिस्डिक्शन लाइक पाकिस्तान। सो आपके सवाल का छोटा जवाब, इट विल हेल्प टू डीपन आवर मार्केट, इट विल हेल्प अस टू ब्रॉडन द इन्वेस्टर बेस फॉर प्रोडक्ट्स लाइक ETFs, जो कि शायद मिस कर रहे हैं फिलहाल। पेनिट्रेशन में हेल्प करेगा ऑन दैट स्कोर। एंड देन अगेन बॉटम लाइन इज स्टिल अवेयरनेस, एजुकेशन, हाउ डू यू डू इट। मैं एक चीज़ पे ज़रूर एम्फसाइज करूँगा, बिकॉज क्रेडिट स्विस, आई यूज्ड टू वर्क फॉर देम इन सिंगापुर। हमारे पास एक पेंशन्स का एक एक्सपर्ट भी होता था ऑन द टीम, और वो ये कहता था, मुझे ये ख्याल आया जब इन्फ्लेशन हिट लास्ट ईयर 37 और इट पीक 38%, तो सोचें उस बात को कि जी 20% अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम आपका जो पॉपुलेशन है वो 65 एंड अबव हिट करेगा बाय 2050। सो एट द मोमेंट इट्स 10, 2050 ऑनवर्ड्स इट विल बी 20%। वो ये कह रहा था कि ये 3 जनरेशन जब एक घर में रहेंगे, जिनमें 2 कमाते नहीं हैं, एक कमाता है, सो दादा, बेटा और बेटे का बेटा, सो सिर्फ बेटा और दादा जो हैं वो कमाते नहीं हैं, बेटा कमाता है। हाउ डू यू रन अ हाउस होल्ड विद इन्फ्लेशन बीइंग 37 or 38%? So yeah, actually this problem is a here and now issue that needs discussion. और ये unfortunate है, but the reality is you will not be able to make sure of the risk by only investing in debt instruments. So the move towards the riskier asset class, educate, aware करें, लॉस भी हो सकता है बिल्कुल। आई नो इट्स गोना बी अ टेरेबल थिंग अगर पहली 2-3 साल में VPS में I heard one of the participants talking about it, which is true, it's factual, ठीक है जी। बट ये एसेट क्लास को आपको आउट परफॉर्म करने के लिए इन्फ्लेशन को ज़रूरत पड़ेगी कि आप रिस्की एसेट क्लास को भी देखें।
Thank you very much, sir, for a very comprehensive reply. I would like to go back to the original question. Uh, Obviously, you answered that these schemes are going to be very good for the market. But since right now we're only talking about pension schemes of civil servants, do you think they're going to be good enough as well? Not only good? Do you think, Adnan Saab, I'd like you to take this question. Do you think the next logical step would be to actually have a mandatory enrollment for the private sector? And in the next phase, if we are to really, reap the benefits of these schemes for the, really reap the economic benefits of these schemes for the markets, how important do you think would it be to scale up this effort, initially from the government to the private sector and eventually to the informal sector?
Thank you very much, Noman. And I must congratulate SCCP because I've been at least involved in this dialogue from the World Bank's avenue for last 3 to 4 years. One thing that I've seen clearly missing is a open conversation on what is happening in Pakistan vis-a-vis the pension reforms are concerned, how it is happening at different pace, at different levels of the government, and how that is going to become bigger and bigger as these reforms are rolled out and they take a stronger footing. I mean, coming to your precise question of the scaling up of these DC sort of pension systems, I think one thing that we have to set right, which I think these kind of activities will help in, is that the understanding of the DC system and the understanding of the pension systems overall, that these reforms are done with the view that they are going to be around for a while, at least for a generation, and with a clear path that how people who are going to be impacted by these reforms are going to be worse off or better off or at parity with the generation that is already in the system. So I think this is a bit of intergenerational conversation, and the intergenerational conversation is that we are moving in public sector from a completely fiscalized system which had no anchoring in terms of growth to a very different system. And of course, there's going to be reaction to that. But having said that, I think the transparency with which these reforms are implemented and their linkage with the financial markets is very, very important. The scale we are talking right now, maybe 50,000 in KP, 8,000 at federal level, maybe some employees in Punjab. This is going to grow. This is going to grow and this is going to become bigger. Now, if we go by the rule of thumb that we have right now, the big supply for these DC systems, the investable supply of securities is going to come from the government. It's actually going to drive the price of government debt down and make government's life easy in that way, and in a way give an opportunity to government to inflate out of the situation that they are in, which to me is a very pervasive incentive. I think this is where the point that was made earlier, financial markets have a very, very important role to play. This money, this demand that is going to enter into the markets need to be met with something which is not just limited to government paper. There were conversations earlier where we were talking about long-term bonds and long-term demand of long-term bonds from the government. I think again this conversation has to move away from government and move to corporates, move to companies, which we haven't seen in Pakistan since the crisis of 2008. So I think that point is the macro volatility point is very much linked with the fact that pension reforms are necessary, and this is where DC is very important. Now, coming it to rolling out to informal markets or the private sector, I think the credibility of this reform is very important at the public sector level, and how financial markets are allowed to absorb this, and how the regulators are able to create that space, that avenue for demand and supply to meet. But again, the precondition there is that the macro has to be stable. Until unless we don't have macro stability in the country, markets would really suffer to come up with returns which are expected. Even if you lower all the thresholds, people start investing at the extreme end in Pakistan. Given the volatility that we see in Pakistan, it's going to remain a credibility issue. The other thing is government's capacity to manage these schemes. Today, the conversation that we had in the session before lunch, to me it was eye-opening, because we had all the governments sitting over here and the conversation was not moving at the same pace. I think they have to come to some parity, because for the informal sector or for the private sector, they cannot distinguish between Sindh government and Punjab government or KP government or the federal government. For them, public sector is public sector. And if they see that public sector pension programs are in trouble in terms of recouping or in terms of creating that kind of benefit, I think that's very important. And that is where regulators' role is very important. That is where government's capacity to manage these reforms transparently is very important. And again, I would emphasize the point that pension reforms are not like you do something today and you are thinking or contemplating in terms of changing them maybe 1 year down the road. These reforms should be pursued at least for the next foreseeable future, for 1 to 2 political cycles, before we even start thinking about changes and tinkering and tweaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nansab. I totally agree with you, and the continuity of reform efforts is definitely very, very important. However, I would like to share some personal view of mine as well here. I personally think that accumulation of pension assets coming solely from the civil servants of the country will take a very long time to provide the kind of stability and deepening that Farooq Saab was referring to. when we run the statistics of other countries and we say that X% of their market is tied in pension funds, we don't talk about the pension funds owned by the civil servants only or by governments only. So, in my personal opinion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that if we really want a kind of deepening and broadening and stability in the markets, then this product, as you said, needs to be opened up for the private sector employers of the country with some incentive and some mandatory adoption, some legal cover, so that we truly have the kind of capital. When you will have the capital, the products will be there as well. And SECP has, I think, rightly sensed this already, as it has floated a draft of amendments to the VPS rules for making it easier for the employers in the public sector, in the private sector, to adopt the system for their pension funds as well. So I really hope that it goes through and it becomes easier. And as you said, the awareness part is obviously most important. A lot of reforms are designed very well, but the problems come during the implementation part, mostly because of lack of awareness, both for the internal stakeholders as well as the external stakeholders. So that's the reason why I also, in the earlier session, raised this point. But thank you very much for a very detailed and elaborate reply. Sana, my next question is from you. How do you think the move towards the DC pension schemes within the government, of course, how do you think it will lower the pressure on the public finances? And how important do you think it was, or how timely do you think this move is?
No, thank you, Naman. I think since the morning we've been talking about the fiscal problem that the pension bill poses. The pension allocation in the budget last year was more than $1 trillion. It is more than $1 trillion in this year as well. It's growing over 15% per annum, and it's far outpacing the growth in revenues. So that is the problem that we're trying to address. A part of it would be through move to DC. And if you're talking about just federal government or just civil servants, it is a beginning. Yes, the pension bill is huge, but we need to start somewhere. If you're comparing it to DB and how DC makes it better, when you're talking about a traditional DB scheme, it is non-contributory and it leads to unfunded liabilities which accumulate over time, and that's what we have seen. When talking about DC scheme, these are pre-funded. So obviously it will reduce the fiscal burden on the government because liabilities are not open-ended. Not only that, we're also talking about there is predictability in budget control, so there's better fiscal risk management from the government side. The reduction in long-term liabilities frees up fiscal space for development priorities. And then, of course, when they build over time, as that accumulation happens, these can be invested productively overall in the economy. But again, I think what is important to understand is that all of these benefits will not accumulate right away. We're talking about transitioning just the new employees, so talking about only civil servants. So I think that's something that the AFS Punjab also mentioned in his presentation. He showed it quite well when he showed those graphs that these have to be accompanied by parametric reforms. So if it's just the move to DC, that will have an immediate fiscal burden on the government. The liabilities will go up because you're now starting to contribute. But if they're accompanied by parametric reforms on DB schemes, that will have a much better impact in the way that it will make that the transition immediately affordable and also will lead to long-term affordability. So for public finances and public sustainability, short answer, yes, it helps quite a bit.
And since you've been you're answering questions regarding the public finances, do you think the savings that you just mentioned that would be achieved through parametric reforms, do you think some of those savings should be after DC contributions are already taken care of? Do you think some of the remaining savings should be used for pre-funding or gradually pre-funding the DB scheme as well? Because the idea is basically that we are sitting over unfunded liabilities. So the basic reason for the transition was to pre-fund it. So since there are legal complications in moving existing employees from the DB scheme to the DC scheme, do you think it'd be a good idea to pre-fund the DB scheme as well, gradually?
Gradually, yes. I wouldn't say it's a good idea to do it right away. We need to take into account the fiscal commitments that the government has in a given year. So if there's a windfall gain, sure. If there's savings, sure. But we also need to see it in the overall aspect of the budgetary requirements for the year. So I don't think there's a yes or no answer to that. But yes, gradual funding, gradual pre-funding makes sense.
Thank you, Sana. Ms. Mashmuma, let's address the elephant in the room. Awareness. Do you think, are you fully satisfied with the awareness promoting efforts of the asset management sector in the last 20 years? Do you think we can compare them to some good benchmark? Have we become a household name for people who want to save?
Well, thank you, Noman. Unfortunately, no, I think that is what is very clear, that awareness is an issue. It has been an issue, it remains an issue, and probably will remain an issue, because what you need for awareness is something which is sustainable and consistent and over a longer period of time. So with asset management companies, what we've seen is that they have phases. Collectively, we've been unable to sort of, get them all on board and, run a sustainable collective campaign. And the India example that we saw and how they eventually managed it, it was that it was being contributed through the funds. So even there, the asset managers themselves were unable to, collectively pool their resources. It eventually came from the funds. And I think that that's probably something that we have discussed with the SEC also, that's the only source where you can have a consistent funding available. So everyone's doing it in silos. Even for this awareness of these defined contribution schemes that are coming in for the new civil servants, again, it's happening, but it's again in so much little silos that it's not really creating an impact. So what we need for awareness is something that can be ongoing. It's not like a 1 month campaign or a 1 week campaign or maybe even a 1 year campaign. Because, I mean, obviously, like we mentioned, we have a very low literacy rate. We have a very low inclusion rate. And our savings rate is also generally very low compared to our regional peers also. So to get to that level, and then we've also had periods of very high inflation in our country. So we've generally become a very spending economy rather than a saving economy. So that requires a mindset change that probably would need decades to actually achieve, to, inculcate the habit of saving, which none of us have.
I'll tell you why people struggle with saving, because I'm also one of those people who struggles with saving, is because there's a long list of companies who are trying to market their product to me all the time, always trying to make me purchase something impulsively, whereas all those companies who are in the business of selling saving products are not making an equivalent effort. Otherwise, greed, fear, these are very, basic human emotions. We can use them to market investment or saving retirement products. But I see day and night marketing efforts from companies who are selling me products which are expenses for me, or consumer products. So I think what you just mentioned, a collective effort by all the asset managers of contributing a small part of their profits would be a good starting point, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think that we've been trying to do that. We've voluntarily tried to do campaigns. But then again, it's everyone's like, when you're trying to do something voluntarily, everyone's vested interest sort of comes in. And then obviously the smaller players feel that, the bigger players would have a better benefit because they have the branches, they have the infrastructure, they can probably grab a bigger pie. Rather than us, even if you were contributing to that. So, I mean, that's how it sort of just pans out. So, what is needed is something more generic. And I don't think we've ever seen anything, and you're absolutely right, in none of the saving products, be it insurance, be it asked, even with these IPS accounts and that the government's trying to promote the debt instruments, but no one's really marketing that. So I mean, obviously, first of all, we sort of need to build in a generic campaign as to why we need to save, what's the benefit of it, and then sort of start selling different products.
I think that would be great if we can see something, rolling in the next few months or quarters, because this is the right time. And I can tell you with some experience with working with the governments, have never been good at advertising anything that is not politically motivated, that doesn't feed the next election. So I'm expecting governments to, probably develop FAQs, guidelines, probably add a clause in the employer letter, but actually promoting, pension products or retirement saving products. I think that burden will remain with the private sector. Basit sir, my next question is from you, and all of us sitting here, we probably understand the VPS product pretty well, and we understand the concept of the trustee. But how do you think this concept can become something well known to the general public? I recently attended, Ms. Mashuma and I, we both recently attended a meeting with the Controller General of Accounts. And he was not clear on the concept of the trustee and why money going to a pension fund manager is safer. We had to actually tell him that, this concept is a tried and tested concept, it's a bankruptcy remote model. But there's no blame on his part that one can place, because there is just no general awareness about that concept. So how do you think CDC can play its role in that? It's something that is highly needed at this point in time.
Thank you, Numan, for this, and thank you, SCCP, for arranging this wonderful topic, which is definitely very encouraging for encouraging saving culture in Pakistan. So about trustee, as Mashuma also mentioned, the awareness is very low right now. Well, there is no collective awareness about this DCC schemes or VPS or mutual fund. That we need to work on that. And definitely when we go for a greater awareness, so we should also emphasize on the role of trustee. Because if we talk about VPS funds or DC funds, so the money of the retirement money is there. So definitely the unit holder want to understand what protection they have for this. So if you see the VPS rules are clearly there, and they clearly define the role of the trustee and the pension fund manager. So broadly the trustee roles comes in, and it is about protecting and safeguarding the unit holder interest. And we do this mainly by three key responsibilities, the role of trustee. One is to safeguard the assets, so and maintain the custody of asset all the times. And for this, all the accounts of the funds and the assets and the security accounts are in the name of the trustee. So whenever a fund manager do a transaction, the settlement is done by trustee. If there is a redemption request, it is processed by trustee. So there is always a check and balance on all the activities of the fund manager. And secondly, we keep a close eye on the compliance of the rules and regulations. So that is also very important, because we ensure that the transactions as they take place are in compliance with the investment thresholds and the rating assigned for an instrument to invest in. So we do that at the time of transactions also, and we do post compliance also. So to make it more secure, if there is a breach of any investment after the transaction, like if you take example of equity, you can get due to market conditions breach of the security limit or sector limit. So that is also monitored by the trustee, and with the collaboration of the fund manager, it is bring down to within the threshold within the given time. And thirdly, the record of the pension funds. So mainly the record responsibility lies with the pension fund manager, but in parallel, trustee also maintain the complete record of unit holder. In case if the data get lost or cannot be accessed through the fund manager, trustee can reproduce that data for the protection of the unit holder. So these are the few measures we are taking it, and definitely the awareness about this is very low. So I think so we need to work on the overall awareness of the VPS and DCC scheme, include bringing in the role of the fund manager, the regulator, and the trustee. So giving more confidence to the unit holders.
And since we were just talking about the central gateway portal, Arsalan also just mentioned that. How do you foresee yourself helping the provincial governments who haven't yet started building their IT platforms for employee enrollment, for coordination with the pension fund managers, for communication purposes with the employee? So, are you also thinking about assisting the governments in that direction?
Yep. With the time, we have launched various such infrastructure platform for various industry, and we are currently working. We have already launched an onboarding platform through which anybody can open an account for stock market, mutual fund, and insurance. So we can leverage that platform for bringing in the VPS and the CC and government employees. So we are already working with the Synth team. We have already taken their requirements. We are evaluating, and definitely we'll be building our onboarding platform for them.
Imtiaz sir, we've been hearing about the proposal for the taxation of the 50% upfront withdrawal, even though Arsalan mentioned, since the budget is still open to discussion, that that's a major tax benefit. But how do you think that is going to affect the VPS product as a whole?
Sorry, I missed the last part of your question. If you could just repeat.
How do you think that's going to affect the VPS product and the drive toward this, this transition towards the DC scheme? Because I'm guilty of selling this to a lot of government counterparts by telling them that there's a huge tax benefit at the tail end. So if it vanishes, if it's not there anymore, how do you think this adoption or this transition will be affected by that?
So I would say that, not just the fact that the financial benefit changes. I think there's, as we've been talking about since morning about awareness, I would probably take it one level forward from awareness to acceptance. I think awareness is there. This was discussed that everybody's informed their employees, this is how it works. The government of Pakistan now has a portal. So awareness is there that a product exists. What is missing is probably acceptance. Now acceptance, we've also discussed what the bottlenecks are, that people don't understand, there's resistance to change, there is a bit of a comfort that was there. But in this context, when everybody, so I'm including everyone, all the stakeholders, whether it's the provincial governments, whether it's the asset management, the pension fund managers as a whole, we're all trying to explain it to those employees why this makes sense and why this is a good product. That explanation process is not easy. And in the middle of that, you then say that, what I've been explaining to you for the last 3 years, that's changed. So that's really the bigger dent. So you see, the pension fund industry at this point is what, 100 billion? Yes, it's a decent size, but again, it's 100 billion out of a 4 trillion industry. So there's a lot of emphasis that is placed on the financial impact of this. So for me, I don't think that's really the big impact. The big impact is that we are working towards an acceptance of a product that is in any case a challenge, and then we shift the goalpost suddenly. And that creates more ambiguity. So for me, the longer term impact is that confidence shaking that will happen, not just to government employees, but there are people who've been participating in this since 2005, right? Now they've started to question the whole premise that, this kind of looked like an etched in stone conditionality, and that's why I was investing for the last 15 years. Now nothing holds. So I think that is the bigger impact rather than the fact कि यार एक बंदा अपनी जब withdrawal करवाने जाएगा तो उसको tax नहीं लगना तो उसको 2 लाख tax लग जाएगा. Yes, it hurts, but I don't think that should be the focus area. The focus should be नई product है, अभी बहुत इसको penetrate करना है. Let's not change the goalpost.
So that basically shows that there's a lack of coordination between the government stakeholders.
So I think maybe there's a communication gap. There is someone, maybe both are looking at it from different perspectives. So again, honestly, I've also been trying to understand. My initial reaction was when I read this was कि शायद कोई oversight हो गई होगी. Honestly, that was my first reaction कि ऐसा हो नहीं सकता, because अगर 3 provinces और government इस पे काम कर रही हैं, this is a product that we are pushing, why has suddenly one of the key pillars of that changed? So that was my initial reaction, and I am still clinging on to that hope that we don't create a lot of confusion for the investors, for the revenue collection that's also not going to be very material. So I am still, of the view that, once the communication happens and, both sides see the broader impact of this, I think we should, be moving towards what the investors are used to at this point and not keep creating complications midway of the investment journey.
Adnan sir, what do you think should be the strategy for the provinces, even for the federal government itself, for coordinating with the FPR and trying to bring this thing on the table for discussion, that there's this consensus effort for promoting this particular product in the government pension system as well, and the later steps may include it scaling it up to the private sector also. So this may be a very bad idea to levy this tax on the withdrawal, at least for the next foreseeable future. So what do you think should be the strategy for the governments? And as World Bank, how do you think you can contribute to that lobbying effort?
So I think one thing that we have to take at face value is the fact that coordination is very difficult in government. And that's the biggest risk with this reform. That when you talk about government as a single entity, there is no single entity. And there's no shared vision about these things. So, and that is where you see fissures, and that is where you see the cracks in which can lead to issues like arrears that we were discussing earlier. Before lunch, there was a conversation about what is happening to these new entrants. The deductions are happening, are they being invested? What's the fiscal implication of that? Because there is the accrued interest on these things. And that creates a credibility issue. Now, this taxation issue, again, is there is no shared vision on these things. And to that end, I think what we have seen recently working in Pakistan is that until unless you have a central point where these things are guided from, it's very challenging. And given the fragmented nature of our fiscal federation, it's very hard to coordinate. And we've seen in this one instance where provinces have taken the lead and federal government is now catching up. So I think the coordination needs to come from the federal government. And you had finance minister in your earlier session. So I think that has to be the central point. And the parameters for at least some minimum level has to align. And that is where I think we are going to see problems 5 years down the road or 6 years down the road when you start to see divergence in how things start to play out. I think in that regard, the central coordination has to come from Ministry of Finance. And the angle has to be very clear that this pension liability, its current net present value is greater than Pakistan's public debt. So that has to be the driving force behind this. Until unless there's, and maybe in debt we had a crisis a couple of years ago or 1 year ago and we still have some issues. But pension is something where we are into a deep crisis already for the existing pensioners. So I think that has to be the lens, that if the credibility of this reform is lost through some myopic decisions or inappropriate sequencing of the policy, which also creates incentives on the financial market side that they also become conservative. So I think it's important. And again, government has to be communicated that this has to be part of not only the fiscal policy, but how they manage their public debt, how they have the coordination between the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, and how the financial regulation is happening in Pakistan. Government has to move out of this and let the market for once work on it. Because if the expectation is still that government will benefit and government will supply the securities as well, this is not going to work. This will sooner or later end up into a situation like Chile. So very important to continue with this conversation.
From what you just said and also what you said earlier, I feel that there's a lack of, or there's an absence rather, of some pension reform plan at the federal level, which should ring fence, all of the pension efforts going on in the country. And although SCCP has recently created this operational monitoring committee, but I think that should be something housed at the top level in the center of government, because it's not about the coordination at one point in time. It's also about its continuity across governments. And when we say across governments, we are talking about five or six governments. So ensuring its continuity may be possible in one or two governments because of some political dynamics, but in some governments, it will be a real challenge. It could be. And as we've recently, seen happening in India, that because of a lack of political will and instead, I would say, for actually taking some mileage by undoing the efforts or the reform efforts done by a previous government. There was some political mileage to be taken. So, Sana, what's your take on that? How important do you think is a multi-year reform strategy with phased implementations across civil servants and state-owned entities and maybe the private sector and the informal sector as well over time? And how do you think some sort of a council of common interest should be there for the pension? If we can have that for the revenue, we can probably have it for the expenditure management. So what do you think would be a good recipe for managing this problem that Adnan is pointing?
Thank you, Raman. I think not just what you said, of course, there is a very critical need for an anchor document of sorts that can not just be a coordination mechanism, but it lays out the plan of expansion going forward. This is, when we talk about a shift to DC, this is not a technical fix that we're doing. We're talking about a strategic shift. We're talking about governments moving from open-ended fiscal exposures to a system that is predictable, transparent, sustainable. It is also very politically sensitive, and it needs to survive various government tenures. Like you said, we've looked at in the morning also when Dr. Shamshad mentioned the international examples, we have had quite a few examples that we can learn from. A lot of that comes down to better coordination and long-term planning. So if that is there, not just for the federal government, but also bringing it all together, again, taking one of the conversations from morning and just now on the panel, it's not just about one government or one part of the civil service. It's about 5 provincial governments, 4 provincial governments, 5 federal government, and expanding it across not just to civil servants, but also to other civil employees, and then maybe expanding it more towards a national pension scheme of sorts, something that India had done. And yes, we will move 3 steps forward and maybe we'll take a step back, but at least if there's an anchor document or a reform plan that brings everybody together, brings the stakeholders together, we're at least moving in the right direction and there is political government ownership for it. And I think all of us here can play a part as development partners. When we engage in policy dialogue, when we design our programs, is something that we need to keep in mind and maybe work together towards it as well.
Thank you, Sana. I think that makes perfect sense. Ms. Mashmooma, we've talked a lot about portability since morning. But every now and then when you meet government stakeholders, they feel that it is very important for them to somehow trap an employee in a pension scheme till he retires. How do you think we can change that mindset? Because I recently had a discussion with somebody very senior in the government, and they have had a full-fledged plan for including in their rules whereby if an employee doesn't work for 10 years, you take back all the government contributions deposited in his account. If he leaves in 15 years, you take back 25% of that or 75% of that, whatever. So that's a full-fledged plan. Not realizing that the portability is not only good for that employee, it's also good for the government itself, because it doesn't have to have any deadwood in the government who's just there to kill time because the pension is at stake. So you either forgo your pension or you keep working. And also, if we remove that portability element, as Farooq Saab said, it will also be bad for the markets, for the market development as well. So how do you think this mindset can be changed? What can the industry or MUFAP do to support this portability element or to highlight that portability element?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think one of the biggest benefits of VPS is that it's portable. So you're essentially retaining your money till your retirement. What the issue is that we have a habit of premature withdrawals. And not just because the other schemes, which are generally already pay-as-you-go basis, gratuity or provident funds, for an example, where you can take loans against it. Or you can withdraw certain for any number of reasons. Sometimes you return, some are without any return. So I think the issue is that we don't have any such schemes. Now, if you want to go for Hajj, I mean, that's a requirement. Every Muslim would want to do that. Bring in a Hajj scheme. Let them save for Hajj. Why should they withdraw their pension or their provident fund to go to Hajj? But because we don't have those other schemes, we don't have that concept of saving for a certain goal. You want to save for your child's education. We don't have education saving plans. There are education saving plans internationally, which again give you some tax benefits, some tax saving accounts which are there, which help you save for a certain goal. So you're saving till your child gets to 18 and goes to college. That money is then transferred to a college fund. If it's not going to a college, then you pay tax on it. And these are developed economies like Canada, UK. So I mean, if they are bringing in tax incentives to promote certain goals, then it's not a taboo here. I think again, I think the biggest issue is we don't have one coordination. SEC is handling their side. FBR is the biggest problem because everything is linked fiscally. So FBR sort of needs to be on every committee, on everything, because everything is linked to fiscal objectives. Now, if you're offering that sort of, if we have a Hajj plan, Malaysia has a very good Hajj scheme. You're saving for your Hajj funds, that's a separate scheme. That's not linked to your pensions. So you don't then have to withdraw your pensions or take premature withdrawals. Once we have those alternate options, this will automatically stop because you're literally withdrawing it to supplement certain needs or goals. You're not just withdrawing it because you don't want a pension when you retire, but it's just because you have immediate requirements which are not being fulfilled through any other saving schemes. So I think if we bring in these education schemes or Hajj schemes, I mean, these are two of the biggest goals that every person has. So, and give tax incentives for it. I mean, obviously, everything's linked to fiscal incentives, but then that's how it works internationally also.
Thank you very much. Farooq sir wants
If I can just also add, मेरे ख्याल से जब भी कोई भी डिस्कशन होता है सीरियस ऑन टैक्स एंड रिफॉर्म, मुझे नहीं लगता कैपिटल मार्केट्स हैव अ सीट एट द टेबल. कि कोई डिस्कशन हो कि जी दिस इज़ गोइंग टू बी बैड फॉर द पी इंडस्ट्री और दिस इज़ गोइंग टू बी गुड फॉर अ सेविंग्स पूल टू बी क्रिएटेड. अगर आप इसको टैक्स करेंगे इस स्टेज पे, then this is going to damage that pool that we need for our long-term upkeep on private equity, upkeep on REITs, upkeep on ETFs or how they are placed. वो I think discussion is missing. हम बात करते हैं education की भी, तो education obviously levels कम है, इसलिए हमें जाके फिर interventions school level पे और college level पे करने पड़ेंगे या कर रहे हैं together as a team. So MUFAB is doing it, we are doing it. I know State Bank does it. वो finance literacy week में काफ़ी eye opening था मेरे लिए on how much they are doing in terms of trying to put savings investments as a subject matter in syllabuses for children of schools. So I'm not only talking about colleges and universities. तो ये आपकी बात बिल्कुल valid है. इससे मुझे just makes me think we had the mayor of Karachi at the Pakistan Stock Exchange yesterday. Yes. And we were discussing municipal bonds. तो हम सिर्फ ये कह रहे थे आपके पास अगर फाइनेंसेस नहीं है, कैपिटल मार्केट्स को यूज़ करके आप एटलीस्ट म्यूनिसिपल बॉन्ड्स तो करें, पूरी दुनिया में होता है. बट अगेन इट्स अ कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ हाउ मेनी पीपल मे हैव स्पोकन टू हिम अबाउट दिस or knocked on his door continuously saying, sir, this is the right thing to do. Because capital markets, I'm telling you, I think I'm telling you with confidence, बहुत कम जगह discussion हो रहा है on how capital markets as formation of capital enterprise use हो सके. I mean, India is attracting tens of billions of dollars on a daily basis in one umbrella called FPI, which is Foreign Portfolio Investment. हम डॉलर के लिए दर ठोकरे खाते हैं. आई एम सेइंग मार्केट पे एम्फेसिस डालें, एजुकेट करें, अवेयर करें. वो अपना काम कर रहे हैं, उनके पास आई थिंक 7-8 लाख इन्वेस्टर हैं, 8 लाख हैं म्यूचुअल फंड्स में. ठीक है जी. बट अगेन
यूनिक इज 650.
So we have under 400,000, clearly very little, right? There's so much work to be done, but it has to be a cohesive sort of effort. So even आप किसी भी नॉर्मल इंसान से पूछ लें, पाकिस्तान स्टॉक एक्सचेंज, उसका इम्प्रेशन होता है शायद 4 लोग चलाते हैं और 3 पैसे हारते हैं, दैट्स इट. एंड दैट कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ द पाकिस्तान स्टॉक एक्सचेंज or the fact that it's a capital formation entity, अपने savings journey को आप इससे भी शुरू कर सकते हैं. That's the missing link.
And Farooq Sahab, I
That needs a
personally
lot
think
of
that this is also a very, very right time to do that because of the fact that the love affair with the real estate
बिल्कुल.
seems to be coming to an end, at least for the near future.
क्योंकि अगर
with
इसके
lots
पास
of-
एक seat होती ना at the table,
Yeah.
where all this think tank sits and says, okay, what do we do with tax for next year? उसमें ज़रूर आता है कि अच्छा, okay, what about the Pakistan Stock Exchange? Sir, नई listings नहीं हो रही. Oh, okay, let's incentivize these startups. Why are they not coming to the formal fold? But is that discussion happening? Or do we have to force that discussion either through SECP or ourselves or knocking down different doors in the ministry? So clearly that think tank needs to
You're very
happen.
right. Portability, since I asked the question on portability, is something very important. Dr. Shamshad mentioned in the morning she had to be a victim of a pension plan which was not portable. Another very dear friend of ours, Abdul Rahman Waraij, when he resigned from the civil service, I'm personally privy to the fact that he left without a pension since he had not worked for the required number of years. So while portability is very important, what potential problems can occur to an investor when to an employee when he's switching jobs from the government to a private entity with a portable plan, and what can be done in order to manage that transition? Imtiaz Sahab, if you'd like to please highlight.
So I think this model has been replicated on the private sector quite efficiently. I don't think we have any issues. A lot of the people in the room might have also changed jobs while being in a BPS plan, and it's a very seamless, change of fund manager kind of transfer as well. If you want to change the fund manager, if you don't want to change the fund manager, you can continue, having your money with the same asset manager and change the job. So I think those protocols are already in place. That should theoretically not be a problem. Yes, it could be that in the first initial few cases, you might get some teething problems that come in, but nothing that cannot be overcome. So again, the whole essence, as has been discussed repeatedly since morning, portability is obviously one of the key things. One of the reasons all of us as stakeholders want to do this is to give people that comfort that this is your money now. We are managing this. We've given you the, initially, yes, I know in the government space, we are not giving more than money market because that's also the right thing to do because the awareness is a little low. But in the private sector, you've now given them the thing, right, that if you are a 25-year-old, you've got the risk appetite, manage your future yourself. This is your money and manage it. So portability is a key part of that my investment strategy should not change because I change jobs. Yes, if my age bracket changes, suddenly I go from a 30-something to a 45-something and I want to lower down my risk, that should again be my call. So that portability, I think it's pretty much embedded into the product. On the government scale, if any teething issues come in, I think they should be fairly easily resolvable because there is a successful private sector model already existing on that.
Thank you very much. My next question is also from you. While designing the DC pension schemes, there was this question of whether a person should be allowed, an employee should be allowed to withdraw an amount lump sum at the time of retirement. Since the legacy pension scheme had this thing called commutation, so it would have been very difficult to, not give that option to the employee.
So you're saying interim withdrawals?
To withdraw at the time of retirement, to partially withdraw the accumulated balance in the pension account at the time of retirement.
Right.
But it's very obvious that once an employee does that, the replacement rates get affected for the next 20 years. So can there be any product development around incentivizing not taking out that money at the time of retirement? Can there be something done by the asset manager to for instance, the insurance companies, they add certain premiums to maintain benefits beyond the term life insurance if you get a whole life insurance. So can the asset managers also incentivize that, that foregoing of that withdrawal by, let's say, giving a better fee rate to that amount that is retained and not withdrawn? Because a knee-jerk reaction of an employee, if you ask him, would be to try and get something out in his hand as early as possible. So, what kind of product development efforts can be done on that?
So I think this is also a kind of an evolution of the product cycle, because initially when you brought this product, it was also very important to retain some of the similarities. You couldn't just go a 180-degree change कि आज तक आपका post retirement ऐसे manage होता था total वहाँ चला गया. So these are things that were required to be kept into the product. Now when you go to the next stage of the evolution, that's where it will come in. So again, I'll go back to the private sector example. Not everyone walks in at the age of 60 and says कि आधे पैसे निकाल दो क्योंकि tax free निकल रहे हैं. They still retain it because they now understand how the compounding effect works, how wealth effect works. So I think it's an understanding curve that will come in. आज के दिन में तो as we have been discussing, आज के दिन का तो problem कुछ और है. आज के दिन तो invest करने के लिए ही तैयार नहीं है. You know, so as stakeholders, I mean again, kudos to the provincial governments that are doing it, but you can clearly see that there will be a resistance. You can clearly see even from the pension fund managers, this is not a product that makes you money this year. This is not a product that changes your league tables overnight. This is something that everybody's been dedicated to a cause that, okay, this is a requirement. We all have to be in it for the long haul. Now, it's part of that evolution that initially you'll have to make them comfortable. Once they're comfortable, you will see exactly the transition you're seeing in private sector, where not all 60-year-olds are coming and withdrawing. But government employees say, "Aaj hi expect karna," I think we would be jumping the gun a little bit. So let them just settle down. Let them keep, bite-sized digestion. कि अच्छा ये ऐसे हो रहा है, ऐसे हो रहा है. Once they get comfortable, eventual stage तो वही है. I mean, there can be no other way. Once you understand the benefits of compounding, you will not want to withdraw it for a one-off, जैसा आप बात कर रहे थे, consumption expenditure. So that's also an understanding, right, that comes with time. So I think we should not push for that too hard. We all have those solutions already there. It's really about the investor being ready कि अच्छा यार अब मुझे 50% नहीं निकालना, मुझे दूसरे products में आप convert कर दें. तो product development होती रहेगी, but आज के दिन में भी there is sufficient product development to cater to that need. It's more the mindset change, I think.
Very right. I think you're right. Adnan sir, if we are to scale this product to state-owned entities, to public sector corporations, and eventually to the private sector with some mandatory participation by the employer, what sort of legal and policy changes do you think are needed to move in that direction? Eventually, I mean, I understand your concern about coordination and the success of the product in the first phase itself, but having achieved that, and whenever the time comes to scale it up, what sort of legal and policy instruments do you think will be needed to create that added flexibility to scale up the scheme to the state-owned entities and public sector corporations, and eventually to the private sector with some mandatory auto enrollment or something like that?
Thank you. I think if you look at the lay of the land and you look at federal SOEs, apart from the ones that are self-sustaining, most of the SOEs are suffering financial losses. So I think their legacy, I'm not sure about their legacy pensions, but I think going forward, to begin with, I think this question is not only limited to SOEs. This question is to broader public sector, that there has to be a wage bill reform in Pakistan, because this is also linked to the adequacy part of it. Unless you look at all of these entities under Section 42, or I mean, you look at the basic pay and then you look at the allowances everyone is getting. And then to think that a pension model would be sustainable, be it DC or be it hybrid or whatever, there has to be some broader reform accompanying to it so that you have a basic scale set right. Right now, that's a big challenge, and that's a challenge for DC's credibility as well. Now, coming to the exact legal framework and the changes, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on the legal aspect of it, but I think one thing that comes to mind and which should be applied uniformly across the public sector entities is that there has to be a reform across the board where migration to this sort of pension scheme is envisioned. Now, that would not happen given the differences in capacity and differences in the balance sheet and differences in the HR as well. For example, you have all sort of spectrum there. Entities like CDA, entities like... so what I'm trying to say is that this is a difficult reform. And again, coming back to the bottom line, the credibility of the public sector pension reform is very important. For this DC to be scaled up, you need to keep in mind that this reform has to be rolled out, implemented credibly. If there are the bottlenecks that we are seeing today, 5 years down the road, you will have a very difficult time selling this to private sector or even to SOEs. The other thing is that this has to be embedded in somewhere in government's vision as well, because we are talking about insurance, we are talking about social protection. This has to come together. This pension reform on its own, I think the journey has happened. There was fiscal pressure, conversation started, governments did, by your help or by maybe Sana's help or someone's help, conversation got to this point. Beyond this point, I think now is the point to integrate it into our fiscal frameworks, into broader fiscal planning and thinking how it is done. And also, please remember, this is a very fragmented fiscal architecture. Everything at the end of the day is somehow thought to be government at the back of it and federal government at the back of it. So provinces need to think very deeply about it, and they have to think together. So this thinking alone is also a bit of a challenge. So again, some central coordination.
I totally agree with you, Nan. And I think what's missing right now is a proper project management approach. You know, where you have all your tasks at one end and you have your little strategies and you map all the processes. And that's what's needed to be done. Without that, the scale up would be very challenging, of course. May I take the liberty of posing the last question to Madam Shamshad? Can we please get a mic? Okay, I'll just come there. Any words of advice for the government as a former finance minister for promoting this effort and for making sure that this is successful as intended?
I think the fact that we had the finance minister this morning and the chairman SECP with his full force and substantive background preparation and launching such a major intervention and an event, I personally think there seems to be a lot of commitment to bring various parties and jurisdictions together. I don't think we should simplify the complexity of the pension reform, but we have to start somewhere, and I think there is a good beginning. There's been lots said about the differences between the provinces and the federation and all that. I won't sweat too much on it, frankly, because I think the provinces have taken a substantive lead. There may be differences, but you know, it's not difficult eventually to harmonize them. But we have to understand also that we have in Pakistan now a lot of autonomy to the provinces, despite the fact that people are grumbling in different provinces about different things. But frankly, the fact that KPK took the lead and then other provinces are taking the lead, I won't worry too much about the differences. They'll all come together eventually. And the really catalyzing force will be Ministry of Finance ruling now in the budget, and also the SECP's continuous endeavor. And this is not the first time they're holding this kind of event. They have done huge amount of heavy lifting, analytical work and all that. I've been along the journey with them. So I just wanted to bring that aspect, and I'd like to stand by whatever Farooq said. We come from the same community, and it's very important that we start this process of generating the pool of savings so that we can deploy in capital market that is well governed. And I think then the cycle will move on. Every country goes through the challenge. I said this morning, if you recall, process is gradual. to think anything different would be wishful thinking, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to say thanks to all the panelists for their meaningful contributions and for taking out the time to grace this event today. Thank you very much. It was a really great discussion. Thanks once again.
As we close today's workshop, we will recap the key outcomes and reflections from the day. I would now like to invite Ms. Musarrat Jabin, Executive Director, Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, to highlight the key takeaways from today's session. Please join me in welcoming her.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum everyone. As we conclude our today's workshop, more of a focused discussion group, I would say, because I love the way, the panel discussions were conducted, the speakers, the way they, imparted the knowledge in their presentations. So let me actually thank all of you, the panelists, the speakers, the participants, for their very active engagement in this workshop. The very valuable insight provided by the speakers and the panelists, and above all, our shared commitments with respect to the reforms in the pension space. So I think today's discussions certainly highlighted both the urgency as well as the opportunity in actually transitioning to the defined contributory pension schemes. So we were reminded of the growing fiscal burden with respect to the existing pension schemes, and obviously we discussed various practical solutions to handle this problem. Which includes obviously improving the governance aspect, the transparency, and of course the use of technology and the market incentives. So जब market incentives कहते हैं तो उसमें, and the last panel discussion I think was very well highlighted as well, that it's just not about any regulatory incentive that the regulator or perhaps the market can actually provide, like the pension fund managers. जिसमें मैं include कर रही हूँ the insurance industry as well, because somebody in the morning highlighted that why is the insurance sector actually carved out of it. So it's not that it has been carved out of it. They are the pension providers. So जो जिसके पास भी license हैं, obviously they are included as well. And the incentives, of course, that have to come from the government. जो लास्ट में फिस्कल साइड्स के ऊपर भी डिस्कशंस हुई थी. सो मेरे जहन में एक चीज़ आ रही थी कि देखें, हर चीज़ करने के लिए देयर इज़ अ वे विच इज़ ईदर यू डिस्करेज. लेट्स टेक एन एग्जांपल. वी सेड दैट कि जो कम्यूटेशन 50% की विड्रॉल की इजाज़त है, अब आप दो काम कर सकते हैं. If you would want the investor, the pensioner, to keep the money in the pension fund and not withdraw the 50%, आप या तो उनको इतना heavy tax लगा दें कि वो खुद ही नहीं निकालेंगे, उनको पता है कि जब निकालेंगे तो नुकसान होगा. Or what you can do is perhaps incentivize them, जिस तरह इम्तियाज़ ने कहा, with the higher profits, आप उनको compounding interest कर दें. Again, these are two means of doing the same thing. What is that we want in Pakistan? I've seen a lot actually things happening also from the SECP, not with respect to necessarily the pension side, but through directives, through regulatory interventions and stuff. Again, also from the awareness perspective, awareness bhi kiski zimmedari hai? It is for all of us. It's certainly not just for the asset managers, for the pension providers, for the stakeholders like the government. It's for everyone. जिसमें academia भी शामिल है. I'd seen, met, the gentlemen from the Bahria universities as well. So everybody has to play its part. And जो आज की discussions में, the presentations obviously that we listened to, the very valued ones, were from the federal government and from the provincial government, giving us an overview and update of all what has been done so far, the progress that we have made. And our panel discussion, as I said earlier, also very aptly highlighted that this transition towards the contributory pension system is just not a reform in the pension space. It's actually building national resilience. It is actually promoting savings. And it is definitely about also, creating the awareness and the, unlocking the, the economic potential this country has. हमारे मसले हैं उनका हल कि हमने खुद निकालना है. Yes, we can always benchmark, other jurisdictions like India, and of course, you don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel every time. But you have to see what the local situation is. So the situation on ground obviously suggests that we have to move in this direction in a very, very fast pace. Just to move forward with some of the key takeaways of today is definitely what has been highlighted in all of the sessions. One was the coordination and commitment across all tiers of the government, and just not the government, but also the private sector. And I must thank all of the private sector जिन्होंने पूरा दिन लगाया हमारे साथ, because being the stakeholders and the government also at the time when the budgets has been announced and there's a lot of work happening in the provinces and the federal side. The second is the trust and the transparency, which is obviously central to the design and delivery of the defined contributory funds and schemes. Awareness has been highlighted multiple times. और उसमें यही हो गया, public awareness and financial education, as I said earlier, is just not a single stakeholder's responsibility, but it is for all of us. And we need to move in a structured manner. हम ये कहते आए हैं, Farooq साहब बैठे हैं सामने, he spoke from the capital market perspective, from Pakistan Stock Exchange perspective. I don't know that as a regulator, and perhaps the stakeholders of the pension fund industry and the asset management companies, they all know कि जी हमारे पास एक इमलाक का portal भी है. Now, this Imlaka portal can very well be utilized also for the pension fund industry, which is not the case at the moment. But this just struck me, and I was just discussing it with Khalda here. So I just thought that आज Imlak use हो रहा है for onboarding of investors or the asset managers. You can onboard, you can make investments, you can redeem it. So it's like a conclusive, all-conclusive and all-inclusive kind of a thing. Why not for the pensions? Why can't such a portal be used or designed perhaps if you want to separately have necessarily one for the pensions? So this could also be done. So एक चीज़ जो हमारी टैक्स के हवाले से डिस्कस हो रही थी, we don't still have the clarity whether this 5% tax is still being imposed on the withdrawals, or it's all probably on the जो आ रहा है कि जी above 70 years of age, and if you have more than 10 million of pensions in a year. So that clarity needs to come. But एक चीज़ और भी which I think was rightly highlighted also in the panel discussions, and which also was picked up by Varait Saab, was that the government actually, but I would actually expand it a bit, it's just not for the government but also for the private sector to issue more debt instruments, long-term debt instruments, so that these can be used also for bridging the pensions जो gap है, and the pension liabilities. And insurance companies ने बड़ा बात की कि जी they need to be involved probably more aggressively in this, which we obviously welcome. But then I don't see many annuity products by the insurance companies as well. So the insurance company, asset management companies, all of them, they themselves highlighted that products and services is a missing area, is a gap. Farooq साहब ने ETFs की भी बात की. हमने जो ETFs देखे भी हैं at exchange, there's not much trading there. So we keep looking for market makers coming and playing their due role. So innovative approach towards filling this gap definitely includes new products and services. But I'll just close it here because there's been a longish discussions that have already been held, so not to bore you more. So on behalf of the chairman SECP, on behalf of the SECP as such, Muzaffar Mirza Saab is here, our commissioner. I would like to thank all of you, and I would like to also thank the finance minister who had graced this occasion in the morning, and especially, as I said, all of you from the private sector as well who's taken out the time, spent the whole day with us. And I definitely assure you that this is not going to be the first and the last session of its kind. We will, inshallah, be having more of these sessions, which is the need of the hour, because we can't obviously deliberate and conclude wide topic such as this pension reforms in this one session as well. So we will, inshallah, be holding more of such, and We expect a lot of contribution from your side, but I am closing this session with, with our sheer commitments that this is just not an SECP job or the government job or, some of the very key stakeholders' job, but it is everybody's job. So inshallah ta'ala, we look forward to have, a Pakistan that is more sustainable with respect to the pensions, space and the retirement space, inclusive and of course, future ready. So thank you very much, and I believe there is another session to follow where Muzaffar Saab is going to give out some mementos to our speakers and our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for concluding the session for today. I would request Muzaffar Ahmed Mirza Saab, Commissioner SECP, to kindly share his remarks before distribution of shields. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Ji. Someone who recently retired is aware of how important is contribution, defined contribution is. What I got from SECP on my retirement after 13 years of services was nothing, but VPS was my only hope. I was forced to retire because I was supposed to take charge of the commissioner, so I have to retire from it. My former boss is sitting here. I think all of you have done a discussion. This is the future of Pakistan. And I think at SECP, now the Commission Office, the Commission Secretariat is taking the responsibility, which shows the commitment of SECP towards it. I was talking to one of the friend who's head of a statutory institution, and I said, you should come towards VPS. It is a must. I think it's, and time for us for discussion is very limited now. It's for action. In my view, we should have a financial services market plan now, not the capital market. Capital market, I think we have too much focus on capital market for too long. It's one component, very important, but I think in one of the model or a TV anchor, I think probably she's doing more for the PSX than they're doing it themselves. I have learned much from her, so I think we have to come out from the key thing is we have to come out of our silos, as Farooq Saab used to. I've learned it from you. So we have to come out from our silos. We have to come out of our offices. We have to sit and discuss. And when we go back, we should take action. And I think Commission is now geared towards helping. A lot of enforcement has been done. If there's any proponent of prosecution and putting people into difficulties, it was me. And when I'm talking about encouraging investment, encouraging businessmen, I think it is something that my experience has taught me that the way forward is actually not a stick. We've used a stick. We've used enforcement. We are protecting people too much and discouraging business. There has to be a balance. Some balance has to stay. And we have all the ingredients that we need to grow as a nation, and very quickly. I mean, we've seen I keep on repeating it, and people see an example, and I feel proud of it. I don't know why, but I feel proud of it. I've done a NSW course, maybe my software is updated. But the thing is, when we went there in the Air Force, we look at they were sure of what they're doing. They were sure that if the things come to an end and we have the sophistication, we have the plan. They had the plan. They executed, and we did it as a nation. Why can't we do it the financial services market? We should have a plan in 2-3 years. We can grow. I keep on giving examples of Malaysia wherever I go, because he's a half Pakistani, and he said they did it. So why can't we? I think it's time to, whatever our thinking is, whatever we think right, we should start doing it rather than discussion. And you have seen SECP now is in forefront. It's coming to you. It's discussing. I think when we go back as a commissioner, I can assure you I'll take decisions. I'll say, go for it. Success and failures is part of it. But if we don't try, we'll never go anywhere. So I think it's a way forward and a very encouraging event such as this, very open discussion that we have. Dr. Shamshad, you're you are a hero for us. You've been there for us for all the time, and you've done a lot for this nation. Likewise, all the people, most of them I know, and few people I don't. But the thing is that I can assure you that there is now sense of urgency and the sense of doing something. We need to achieve. We have to build financial services market as a whole, and this is a key component. When you retire, you need money. And this is a shocker that this is like when you're dying, you'll know, I've done nothing in my life. And when you retire, for the first time I came to know that, I've left with nothing. What if I didn't had the job? And now I keep thinking, what after 3 years, what will become of me? So investment and saving, especially this contribution, is necessary for us. For private, I think we should make sure that SOEs must have this. I mean, if there's any welfare that is supposed to be done by the government or by the SECP or any, welfare is something. When you leave the job, when you're out of the job, you have something in savings. This is must. We don't realize it when we're doing a job. I never realized it, that someday my job will end, and what will I do? So I think we need to realize this. This is most crucial for every employee, for whether he's in private sector or public sector. And I think with your guidance, we'll achieve it. We should go to every institution. My idea is to go out of the office of SECP. I don't want to see my officers sitting there. We have 27 licenses, which I have never knew about. I think we should now go to the people and, through media, through electronic media, we should have these organizations. We should work with you and ensure that people are aware of these business. And probably we get more ideas. So I will not take much of your time. I've already, अगर मैं बोलता रहूँगा तो फिर आपको पता है मैं बहुत बोलता हूँ. Farooq Saab is aware. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you for contribution. आपको बस बार-बार ये श्योर कराना है कि we are there for you. आपको कोई प्रॉब्लम होती है, कोई इश्यूज आ रहे हैं, आप knock at us. We are available 24/7. आप मैसेज करें. I think even commissioner level लोग are available. EDs are available. We not an office. अगर आपको नहीं मिलता, आप शिकायत लगा दें हमें. इस महफिल में लगा दिया करें. So we are available for you. We 24/7 we are available for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I would like you to kindly distribute the shields of appreciation to our panelists and guest speakers for today. I would like to call Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, our guest speaker for today, to kindly come on the stage and receive her shield. Please give her a round of applause for her. Udhar hi bhijwa do. Okay. Kindly. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for attending the session today. Ms. Sadia Kanwal, our guest speaker for today, kindly come on the stage. A huge round of applause for Ms. Sadia. A round of applause for Ms. Sadia, please. Mr. Kashif Mumtaz Sheikh, our guest speaker for today. Please put your hands together for Kashif Mumtaz Sheikh Saab. Thank you, sir, for your presence and your contribution. Mr. Naveed Alam Khan, another guest speaker for today from KPK. Thank you, sir, for your presence and insightful contribution. Mr. Mujibur Rahman Kakar, representative from the Balochistan government. I think he's not around. Now onwards to the panelists for today. Oh, gee, Mr. Mujib is here. Thank you, sir, for your presence. Now onwards to the panelists. Mr. Farooq Sabzwari, our first panelist for today. Thank you, sir. A round of applause for Mr. Sabzwari. Ms. Sana Masood from the Asian Development Bank. Thank you, ma'am, for your presence. Ms. Mashmooma Zahra Majid, our third panelist for today. Please give her a round of applause. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your insights. Mr. Abdul Basit Kuttari, as our fourth panelist for today. Thank you, sir, for your presence. Please give him a round of applause. Mr. Imtiaz Gadar. I think he's not around. Mr. Numan Liaquat, our part. Okay, sorry. Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Numan Liaquat, a very active participant and moderator. Thank you very much, sir. Now we move towards the SECP team who has arranged the event under the able leadership of Ms. Musarrat Jabin and Mr. Arsalan Zafar. Ma'am, please come on the stage to receive your shield of appreciation. Ma'am Musarrat Jabin, please give her a round of applause. Mr. Arshad Kamal from the SECP, sir, kindly come on the stage. Mr. Kamal has arranged the event for today. I think he deserves a round of applause. Mr. Usman Ahmed from our pensions team. He has worked really hard. A round of applause for him too. Mr. Adil Iftikhar from the pensions team, kindly come on the stage and receive your shield. Ms. Fiza Zainab Jatoi, another member of the SECP pensions team. Put your hands together for her. I think they deserve appreciation for their effort. Mr. Ruhail Ahmed Abbasi. Thank you, Ruhail, for actively managing the event today. Mr. Muhammad Ahmed, our IT team member, who's been coordinating the ITS pacts. Thank you, Mirza Saab, for distributing the. Okay. Okay. I would like to call Mr. Arsalan Zafar, head of the Pensions Department, to kindly receive his shield. He's been working tirelessly for the past few weeks to arrange this event. A huge round of applause for him. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mirza Saab. With this, we come to the conclusion of today's event. We are immensely grateful and indebted to our speakers, panelists, representative of the federal and provisional governments for taking out time for discussing the crucial pension reform agenda. With your contributions, we have a clearer picture and practical takeaways on the way forward. We conclude today's proceedings. Thank you very much for your presence. Tea is open for all. Have a good evening, ladies and gentlemen.